Hello there. Just waiting for the live to finish activating. Here we go. Oh, we can even hear it. Good. Okay. Oops. Oh, I'm going to get to the right timeline. Sorry. One more second. I just can't see the comments unless I'm seeing the live feed here. So here we go. Perfecto. Okay, let's get started. My beautiful friend Larissa did a beautiful post earlier today, and deeply with me basically on how if you look on my timeline, you'll see it was about helping yourself before your date so that your sexual energy didn't get mixed with the other person and become dominant in sexuality versus connection and those kind of things. So and she brought up something that's really important, and if anybody knows what the Maslow's hierarchy of needs is, it's this kind of inverted triangle. It's like, for you to be able to safe and be able to have a relationship and be able to have all these things, you have to build this infrastructure of certain needs being met before you can advance to the higher levels. And some of the basal levels of this is like food, shelter, and our sexuality is even part of it. And it got me going deeper in building some self-understanding of our whys and what needs are being met. So a lot of us are going through a lot of spiritual awakening right now. We're trying to understand ourselves, our needs, etc. And a whole bunch of crazy stuff is going on underneath. And at the same time, we're struggling with our sexuality, our pleasure, our self-love, being able to feel loved. And then we're in a world programmed with all these requirements. Okay, if you're going to be sexual with a person, you have to be planning to get married and building a relationship. And once I'm sexual with that person has to be monogamous with me for me to feel safe, for me to feel safe around STDs. There's a ton of societal programming that says these things must be met before you're allowed to participate in sexuality, to have your sexual needs met. And I'm going to propose that a lot of those are societal programs and conditioning that's not really helping anyone. It's basically there to keep us in a loop of kind of trapped of having our needs met by forcing us to have to make strong commitments to other people, to basically align with them before, and then it makes meeting our own sexual needs and those kind of things outside of ourselves. So I have to find a female partner or a male partner if you're a woman. And then each of those person's inner safety concerns, etc., all have to be met and matched before we can join in this sexual connection with another person. And I'm going to tell you right now, based on everything I've known, the inner landscape that I have, the journey that I've had, it was never meant to be that way. It is very common knowledge that for people to feel safe, and especially programmed into women need to have this monogamous man partner that's committed to them, or else they're jealous or other things. And really, I'm going to say for men and women both, this isn't just specific to women, but there's a lack of internal safety that they have within themselves, and they're demanding this from a partnership, from a connection, from marriage, from sexual intimacy with another person, when really this is a problem with their own self-love. Their self-love requires that other person to be something before they can feel met, before they can feel safe, before they can commit themselves. And it gets to be a very hard situation, buried in all this kind of thing, that how do we get this base sexual need? Like, we have food, and we've got shelter, but I'm proposing that most people, unless they're married or in some kind of devoted, committed relationship, that's when they're supposed to get their sexual needs met, but they're actually not even getting their needs met then. It's a slippery slope that starts to happen where the marriage, the relationship breaks down, sexuality starts to be used as bargaining chips and safety things, and then there's resentments, and a big mess happens because everybody's programming is based around societal programming that really isn't helping anything. Our relationships are about pleasing others. Our relationships are about filling ourselves with other people's love and feeling loved, and how do we feel love? And we don't even talk about these things, and then we end up in this like bonded relationship of marriage through a marriage contract or a marriage certificate or whatever, and then our needs aren't even met because we're not even feeling safe discussing these things. A bunch of shames and guilts are all hidden underneath, and most of our relationships aren't about communication, aren't about sharing our needs and our desires. We're more worried about, will they be scared away because now I won't have their love, and then I'll be broken and I'll be empty, when really it needs to be built the other way around. Our hierarchy of need needs to be built from self-love first. And self-love isn't, oh, I feel really safe when I have a partner. Self-love is from, I feel really safe when I'm by myself and I'm making good boundaries and I'm making good choices and I'm having a lot of deep communication, stating what I want. And then we don't get in situations where stuff is unstated and where stuff gets worse or falls apart or grinds to a halt because we've never really been completely truthful with ourselves. We kind of let our needs go to the side so that we could please the other person, and as long as we're happy or they're happy, we'll be happy. But that's a lesson for disaster. And guess what? You start giving all your love to another partner, and if something happens, another woman or another man comes into the life, an affair happens, have you not seen a cataclysmic, explosive result? Marriages fall apart, children get hurt, violence happens, etc. So our relationships are built by hanging on to another person in a lot of cases, and that's really not self-love. But eventually we'll get pushed into self-love. Will somebody be violent towards us, or resentments will build, or any of this? It's a big mess that can start to happen if we're not consciously aware of what we're choosing. So this is why our basal needs aren't being met, because we're trying to meet them by pulling outside people into our world so that we can feel safe and happy. But really, the word that keeps coming up is perverting ourselves to try and please that other person so that they're happy. What I'm proposing is we need to step back and start to look at this and start to see the societal programming, the choices, the other things that we're doing that get us into the picture of love. And I'd call it lowercase love versus uppercase, all letters love. Lowercase love is loving another person by giving up ourselves, being subservient or dominant or whatever. There's a big mix of mixed ideas, but we're really dumbing ourselves down so that we can be happy. And that's all we're allowed and all we're worthy of. And it becomes a big, nasty mess that goes with this. Instead, what I'm saying is we build it from ourselves. We start, instead of chasing relationship or bonds or whatever, we start to realize that a base need is our sexual self. So some of those base needs can be satisfied by self-pleasure, by pleasing ourselves, pleasuring ourselves more, making better choices for ourselves so that we feel safe and trust in our yeses and nos. Because a lot of times when we go into relationship, we start to twist what we want to try and please so that it makes it easier, and this person will just love us, and then we can just sit in that calm and that bliss. Where now I'm saying we start making the choice of, what do I want? What's inside here? And remember that sexuality is a basal need. So it's like food. Do you go and make a committed monogamous relationship with your grocery store because they're the supplier of of food, which is one of your base needs. No, you're going to go to this grocery store and this one, which is on sale, and this one. You have a broad range of choice. What are some of the other things, like your house? It's like, okay, yeah, you're making a committed relationship with a landlord or a mortgage to a house or whatever. So we kind of lock into that, but you can always sell, or you can always end the lease and move on. Where when we start looking at our sexuality and our pleasure and our connection with others, we end up in a different model. Now it's like, okay, I need to keep this person happy so that this safety I'm feeling from my relationship of being with this person won't get shaken up and broken. And something really magical starts to happen when you start to look at it and start saying, when was my most fun and pleasurable in my relationships? When it was free and airy and really just in the moment, and it wasn't about guiding to someplace, oh, I got to get engaged and get married, get on the relationship escalator and right up to the top, which has a whole bunch of other mangled shit going on it. No wonder we're not getting that basal need met. How can we get that basal need met? Okay, well, we start looking at the rules that guide whether or not, what's my mother going to think? What's my friends going to think? Am I going to be a slut, or am I going to be seen as a player, or whatever? Who the frick needs to know where my sexuality is and what I do in my evenings and those kind of things? And we start making choices to start explore ourselves. And I'm going to tell you right now, a huge path of healing ourselves spiritually is our sexuality. We can go in and use orgasmicness, connection with another, going to the edges of being with another person, but not being bonded to them, makes it possible to go into a situation where you can express angrily or whatever fear or past emotion that's coming from your trauma come up, which you may not actually express with a partner that you're trying to have a long-term relationship. But if it's somebody that you can trust and you want to be sexual with that person, you're choosing that choice to be sexual with that person, you can start to get into healing possibilities that are way different without all the rules of relationship of bonded, monogamous, marriage, religion, whatever. And this is going to go against a bunch of that stuff. And I don't care anymore. I grew up Catholic. This would be looked upon very badly. People are doing it anyways. Whether you want to admit it or not, people are sharing sexuality before marriage all the time. It happens very often in college. People are trying people out. And what I want is to get the shame out of all that, to get out of, oh, what's everybody going to think or whatever, and say, my basal needs need to be met. And if I'm in lack and I only get sex once a year, or I got to go to the club to get hooked up or whatever, your basal need is not being met. You are living in this lack. And I'm going to tell you right now, your choices living from that lack is actually going to make you choose the wrong partner. You may choose somebody that's hot sexually, or their body's beautiful or whatever. You're going to find out that they're like fucking messed up in bed. They just are all about the body and all this kind of stuff. You want somebody with connection. You want somebody that's empathic. Trust me, a person that's a little bit more overweight is more of a person that's sheltering themselves and protecting themselves, and they're going to be emotional and they're going to be loving and these kind of things. The people that have to be fit and slim and whatever to meet the societal expectation are people that sometimes are hard and they have a trauma before you can even start. So what I'm saying is we need to go and explore, to try out, to go into these places, to build a conscious place where you're making a conscious plan with another person. Say, hey, I attracted to you and I'd love to explore this. Can we negotiate a relationship or a conscious agreement where we're going to explore some of our healing that we need sexually or moving through trauma or other things. And it's a person that you're going to be able to be really honest with, where you might not be as honest in a relationship or a marriage because you're worried about what they might think. But if you could go into a place where you could just trust somebody and say, hey, I'm going to be really raw and open, and I'm going to do my best to be well, I wouldn't say controlling emotionally, but handling my triggers well. And you're going to want to do this with somebody where you're okay to go to gritty edges and be prepared to walk away if you needed to, which you may not be if you were committing into a longer term relationship with somebody before you could even do this healing. Because I honestly believe that we need to go into some what I call 3-month relationship containers, where you consciously negotiate having something more than dating with another person for 3 months. You can't walk away. You're going to deal with whatever things show up. You're not going to shack up together and live permanently. You're going to have spaces where you can go back to when things hurt, but you're also going to be required to speak about what shows up. You can't just run away. The container is bonding for both of you. And when you get to the end of that container, you can make a choice and say, hey, this isn't working out. But it's way better than dating. Dating is you're going from this thing and you're not understanding what the other person's thinking and how you're being judged, and nobody's really talking and nobody feels safe being able to ask questions, where instead you're required by the commitment of this relationship container to go through all this kind of stuff. And I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to go through so much stuff that is spiritual work, that is spiritual understanding of yourself, 3 months, and different where trying to be in a long-term relationship with this person. And I'm going to tell you, by going through these relationship containers, you're going to figure out what you want and who you are. And when you get to the end of that period where you're going to have a discussion with each other about whether you want to continue, most people aren't going to walk away. Most people are going to start to see that person in a much deeper level. And if anything, if they don't want to continue together, maybe they're not at the same level right now. They may sit in a friendship and say, hey, I'm still a friend. I'm just going this direction. I don't feel it's a fit right now. But that same person in a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever, after they've gone through some stuff, may be a fit all of a sudden. But also, the really cool part is now you're figuring out what your wants are, what your desires are, and you're trying to fill your puzzle, and you're trying to find it through interacting with a bunch of different people. But if you go in and commit, and the only way you can get to that level of emotional development or emotional depth or connection is to promise them that you're putting a ring on their finger or getting engaged, there's a whole bunch more skin in the game, I guess is what I'd call it, where I'm suggesting do what you're doing now. Go on dates and all this kind of stuff, but make it a conscious container. Pick a person that you might want to explore something with. Have a hard conversation with them up front. I'm starting to build them. They're these like little relationship contracts. What do you want? What don't you want? All these kind of things. And you state them all before you start. And you're going to find out, oh, that person doesn't want sexuality before marriage. This person doesn't want this. And you're going to find out this person has a whole bunch of things that they probably never stated to anybody. And things fell apart because of it. And then they're hurt and wounded because of this thing, because it was never disclosed in the beginning. And you end up just torn apart because you didn't know about your partner. So to go into these containers, to be really committed to it during that period, gives safety for both sides. And it allows you to explore stuff that might be squishy and painful. And you're building that container before you start. Because most people are going into a relationship and it's like, oh, let's go for a date. I'm going to talk about grandma and friends and whatever. And am I attracted sexually? Am I not attracted sexually? What's going on? And then you go through a conscious process of deciding whether they're safe. And then all of a sudden, one person gets scared or triggered and they ghost the other person and things fall apart and both sides end up traumatized and it's a big mess. What I'm looking for is go in and make a commitment to someone. It might not be your typical person, but there's something cool about them or something that could be really fun or playful, and build a container to see how that could feel. How does that feel different from the last one? You're now kind of going out and sampling fully open-hearted, fully in a container that hopefully protects you from having a lot of conflict that can't be responded to because you're bound. You've made a commitment. If that person runs away or whatever, it's just their fear going on. But if you make that container and you start to explore with that person, and if it's with a person that you're okay with walking away from, you're going to set some really cool boundaries for yourself. You're going to start to say, okay, I won't accept this. And then you have a discussion about it. And then it's like, oh, why won't I accept this? Oh, what in my past caused this to happen? And then a magic starts to happen because now you're choosing yourself. But if you're If you got that relationship thing on it, the marriage, the engagement, the whatever that is the path to proper societally accepted sexuality, we kind of prostitute ourselves along the way. We kind of give up key parts, let down our boundaries, etc., and then we're hurting afterwards. So what I'm suggesting, we need to get back to a place where we can negotiate our basal needs to be met, and sexuality is one of them. So where do you go? Who do you talk to? How do you find a person to share that level of sexuality with? You come into a community of other people that want that, and then you start setting up relationship agreements. You try them out, you go into periods, you come back to the community and talk about, oh, this didn't work out, or maybe your partner didn't meet you or couldn't communicate in something, or maybe you need a community container to hold you while you kind of push through some stuff that's edgy for both sides. Some magic happens, because now the people in the community are seeing reflections of themselves in all these things, where maybe two people are in a circle and talking about what's going on in their relationship and how it's not working out. And now the group's adding popcorn input and saying, okay, well, I had this too, and it was a fear of my dad, and it was something back from my past ex or whatever. Now we have this community space, this shared space, where we're going through self-exploration, we're going through transformation, we're going through initiations inside of ourselves to eventually get back to self-loving. And I mentioned it before, do you really think you're going to make good choices around sexuality if you're in lack and you're not having it often enough, or the people you feel used in that kind of stuff? What would happen if there was communities, and that's what Awakening Through Sexuality is, where we start to ask people to be honest and open about what their sexual needs are and desires, and that they'd want to go into a contract like this. Some people have seen a video a little further back between Bonnie and I, where we were talking about creating a play partner type relationship where we use that to self-explore. And we go to levels we could never go with another partner, because really there's no destination. It's fun, it's playful, it's exploring. Oh, I didn't know that was that, and I didn't know this felt that way, and maybe I have a block here, or maybe she does, and now we can do it because we can get through it, because we're now consciously asking for ourselves, ooh, that feels icky or whatever, and why are you talking so badly to me, or why did you say it that way? And you can come out and say, hey, what's going on? Let's talk. And it's not like I have to hold it together so that I feel safe or whatever. It's kind of like, what's going on for them? Or is that just me? How do I get to know which one of us it is until I can have a conscious conversation? And then the sexuality, the skin touch, the cuddling, the bonding is really cool, because now it has no destination. It's not, I got to get engaged, or I got to live with them, or I got to have kids with them, or, oh, there's so many things that are going on there, where it's just like, no, for me, I want to really understand this person before I'm going to make a long-term commitment. I want to really find out what I want for me, what parts of sexuality, what edges, what fun things are present in me that I need to have met. And then I can ask that conscious play partner, do you want the same thing? They're like, oh, I never thought I could ask about that before. And you get into stuff that some people may consider dirty, like maybe ass play or bondage or bloodletting or whatever the things are that some person might find sexually exciting. And everybody's got different traumas. Everybody's got different things that their programming is based around. So what I'm saying is, the only way you're going to get your basal need met, and a lot of us through divorces and other stuff know that basal need of having sexuality met isn't guaranteed in marriage anyways. It isn't guaranteed in relationship. People can have traumas, other things. So what I'm saying is, we have to change our perspective of love and of relationship, and start to find a place where our sexual parts of us can be met. And that may be through self-pleasure, that may be through videos, or some people go to other places that I don't think are really conscious, like swing clubs or those kind of things. I'm saying, go to a place where other people that are trying to find their sexual selves, their sexual needs met, and I'm not even talking like tantra groups or whatever, because some of those are really twisted in themselves, but start to find a place and say, okay, what do I need? I need a sexual partner in my life right now. And I want to find people that are conscious and willing to do the work and would want to explore that sexuality. And we can start talking about what our fears are and what our concerns are, and bring them up front in a relationship contract and build a container that meets all those things. Or at least you're making a decision from the beginning. It's like, ooh, well, I'm really looking for more sexuality in my life. And if you're waiting until marriage, I don't think this is going to work. And we can talk about that at the beginning. And it's not that they're bad that they want that, but thank God this thing was brought out beforehand. My experience, I had a sexless marriage. So if I would have known that my partner had a trauma, would I have went into that marriage? Would I have known myself enough to know that sexuality was really important to me? So now I can make that as part of my relationship questionnaire. It's like, okay, is sexuality important to you? Do you like to have sex regularly? Do you have to turn off the lights when you have sex? Are you scared about edges, or I like it vanilla? Or do you even want sex? What's important? Oh, I need to have movies. I need to have cuddles. I need to have conscious touch. Those things might fill you as well. Things like parasympathetic release of touching another person's skin to skin can be almost as inspiring and beautiful as sexuality, especially in this world where we're kind of mangled up around touch and any kind of close contact. So how do you get your basal need met? And we're all failing because society has conditioned us around dating and relationships and marriage and past experiences and all this kind of stuff to say that doesn't work out and it's really hard and you're really bound. Well, what if there was no commitment? Well, what if there was no expectation? There was no end result other than one you've negotiated. We're going for 3 months. We're going to be fully sexual and explore and go to our edges and talk about things. And for the first little while, it's going to feel uncomfortable and weird, but then eventually we get to the point where it just flows. It's like, okay, what needs to come through without any end result? And we're not worrying about that timer. We're not worrying about all those pieces. At the end, it makes a softness. It makes a possibility. It makes an exploration. And I can't, your comments are awfully long there, James Bond, but this is a new level of spirituality for people. Those conversations are really, really hard. And you have to be an awake person to be prepared to have that. And once they see the result in a community of people that are consciously doing this, they're going to want it for themselves. It's so different from what they've been taught. They're going to have to look at all their inner rules, their inner dialogues, what their parents will think, what their ex-lovers will think, what their kids will think. And there's a story going on there, and we got to get out of the story and start choosing ourselves. And with the right tools, real conversations aren't hard. And to go into a place, a community where we're taught triggers, there's a triggers training that's part of Awakening Through Sexuality. Go in there and start to understand how triggers work and where they come from and where it's trauma and all this kind of stuff. We're going to start finding out that we're doing things based on trauma and past results and all those kind of things. Yes, there more consciousness is coming, and there's key people in this world that are wanting this. And I'm only speaking from my personal experience. I tried the whole game of hiding and speaking in third person and not really stating what I wanted, and it hurt. And I'm just finding more and more and more, I got to speak truth. I got to say what I want, find people that want the same thing through a little bit of difficult conversation. But I'm going to say for sure that conversation isn't difficult anymore once I found out how much it loved me and it self-loved me, because that hard conversation that states a boundary or what my needs are, and I very clearly know if that other person wants the same thing, it's so much more clear, and it's so much easier to proceed forward because my needs were met. My ability to ask is the key to everything. That ability to not feel ashamed, that ability to not feel guilt, that ability to say, hey, I love loving sexuality. Hey, would you want the same thing? I know it's really hard and I'm not really looking for a commitment right now or whatever. It changes everything. And James, I agree. You speak your truth. Many people struggle with it. We're stepping ahead of the line. We're moving forward through the mass of probably 80%, 90% of the population unaware. And the people that are going to start to show up because we deserve them are the people that can meet us and that can say those hard things and have a hard conversation. And very rapidly, what used to be really hard conversations become really powerful, sexual, amazing conversations. It's like, fuck, I'm feeling dirty right now. And I want to do this, and I want you to take me from behind or do something. And now we're in that animalistic, that desire part of ourselves, and we're starting to not go from, oh, what are they going to think if this, to like, really, my body really wants this, and I'm going to state it out loud. And if he wants that same thing, something really powerful can happen. And unfortunately, in this world, in this matrix frame that we're in right now, I don't know if you've watched the latest Matrix movie, but it's all twisted. We, the people that are shining the light, that want the truth, have been penalized and persecuted and whatever for trying to be the light. That's changing. And this old way of codependence and bullshit and narcissism and not talking about the truth and speaking in inverted ways is going away. And just telling you, I've walked through the wall of that, and I'm starting to meet people that meet me up at that level. But all the way along, people were kicking and screaming and yelling at me and being angry that I was too direct and too uncomfortable and all this kind of shit. And fuck them. I have to be that if it's important for me, and it gets clarity. I win every time by asking for my clarity. So it's not an easy thing. And I'm trying to read what you said there. We are teachers. We're showing a new way, and non-attachment is going to get us into freedom. And then that freedom can lead to a conscious choice of attachment with a person once we know they're safe, they're comfortable, they're handling their own shit, they're doing all that stuff. But instead, we're loving outside of ourselves and we're having attachment so we can feel safe. And the relationships that are starting to work for me are the ones that have no attachment, no destination, are just fun and playful. And everything changes when you can come from that innocence, that purity, that inner child place. And then you can start speaking about the things that hurt. This wasn't fun. This wasn't enjoyable. Because really, we're on a journey back to self-love. And the only person that knows what we want is us. And the only way people around us are going to know what we want is to speak. And the only way we're going to know if they're uncomfortable about it or they've got triggers around it is to hear them speak back. And how much of that is happening in non-conscious relationships? Almost zero. We're just wandering around, just loving each other, having friction-based sex, 3-second orgasms, like genital hiccups. We're not consciously connected. We're not feeling safe enough to open our soul, open our yoni, open our cocks to penetration and surrender. And that's the sex that's going to feed us. That's the sex that can change everything. And that's what we're on the journey for. That's the amazingness we're going through. And that's what I'm just suggesting. How can we do that? And let's get a conversation and in the post. And I'd love to do more lives. I'd love to get a Zoom together with a bunch of people that want to talk about this. How would it work? What would feel good? What do you need in your world so that you can start to express yourself sexually and not feel guilty about it and ashamed about it? So nothing intended for you can ever pass by you. Knowing what is resonating and allowing for flow, we'll be able to shift without fear. Knowing with every experience comes a lesson. Yeah. And I'm saying what I'm talking about creating here is a conscious sandbox where we can go in and start to explore those edges, those things that are going on in confidence with other people, and having some really basic boundaries and rules where we can start to integrate with other people, go up to our edges that scare us, make me feel uncomfortable, made us break up in our past relationship. And by practicing non-attachment and self-love, we're starting to be truthful. We're opening our throat chakra. We're starting to open our root, finding ways. And I'm going to tell you right now, the initiations, the changes, the shifts that come in consciousness through all this kind of stuff is mind-blowing. And it doesn't mean you have to have a twin flame or that conscious partner or whatever. You start to engage with people at your sexual level, and it's going to be amazing. So this is coming, and I want to do a workshop on it. I want to get conscious people to come in and start talking about this, and then starting to connect with others that want the same thing. It's a little harder when we're so far apart, but what are the ground rules? What are the ways that we build a safe container to start to explore ourselves? And we can only explore ourselves with another. But if we create a sandbox, you could call it a boxing ring if you think it's going to be a little more adversarial or more physical, but the sandbox is the place where we say, okay, this is what's acceptable in it. This is, you got to handle your triggers. You got to do some trigger training beforehand. You got to know how to deal with it. And then I'm going to be able to say, I'm feeling really, really scared right now. Can you wait a minute? I'm going to step back. Whatever you just said triggered the fuck out of me. And it could be something about your dad and something about whatever. It has nothing to do with this person. But until you can consciously sit there and say, I'm triggered, and all this energy is wanting to vomit on your partner, and your partner knows that maybe this triggers you or whatever, but you're now saying, okay, 24-hour rule, this has really triggered me. I'm going back to my house and my bed, and I'm going to sit with this. But in 24 hours, I have to come back and I have to explain what was going on. By now, you've processed that. It got brought to the surface through another person, which you probably couldn't have done alone. But now, all of a sudden, you have a commitment to this person that you're going to explore it. But really, it's for you. It has nothing to do with them. But as you said, James, every freaking thing that shows up is to teach us. And if we can go into a container where we can handle sexuality and all the freaking programming around it and shame and guilt, and we can come back and say, oh, fuck, that was a programming thing and it's really hard. Can you listen to me for a few minutes? And we're going to get through this, and we're going to get through it together. And maybe something magical happens on the other side, like makeup sex or some really intimate bond shows up, and you're now having sexuality where you're screaming and crying and moving all this stuff out of your body. But how could you get to that point if you didn't want to be raw and scared and painful and all this kind of stuff with someone, or at least trust someone enough to do it? There's something huge left on the table. And most relationships don't even build a container that you could handle this. But if you went with a conscious group of people and started to do this, you are doing your work in a massive way, and going into a space with someone you trust and someone you've made a commitment to not run away from, and you can go to the mat and you can spread wide open, smash yourself into a million pieces and deal with whatever shows up. That is like no relationship I've ever talked about. But to build that container requires some consciousness, requires the willingness to go and look at shit you don't want to look at. And you're going to trust that person more than ever. And out of that container, even if you don't want to stay in a bonded container after 3 months, you're probably going to have that person as a best friend for the rest of your life, because you shared shit and told them stuff that you wouldn't have told to anywhere else. But because you weren't needing the relationship. At that point, once you've gone through it and you're out of the lack and your sexual needs were met and you're feeling good and safe, you're going to now say, holy crap, this is a person I want to have in my life. Maybe you make a 3-year relationship contract. Maybe you don't make a relationship contract at all, but now you're making a conscious choice from who that person really is. Not a bunch of coy questions. Well, what do you think about your grandmother? What did you do with your ex in a date? And all this mess, where now we've gone fully sexual. We've gone into the shit that was ugly and I got triggered every time. And I can trust this person that trigger is not going to have them be violent with me, or that I can go to that edge and now I don't have to hurt or yell or scream. Now it's like, oh, I'm dealing with this. Can I breathe? Put some body weight on me, or massage my back or my shoulders, because this pain and suffering is stuck in me. Now you have a conscious place. You can't just go and do this on your own. Sometimes you need that crucible of another person holding space for you and starting to say, what the fuck is going on? Please cry, please scream. And that person listens. And more than likely, if you've been bonded and called together, they've got a little bit of that same wound, or they've got an equal and opposite. And their learning comes from sharing and being vulnerable and being in self-responsibility and being in accountability. These containers will allow us to have our sexual needs met. And we negotiate them in advance. And it's like, yeah, I need sex once a day, or I really like sex once a day. Is that something that you want? And you get this all out on the table instead of wondering if they think the same or whatever. You're saying it. This is the path to those first steps. So I'm just reading James' last comment. There are people that do not have an interest to awaken. Yeah, there's lots. But with whatever's about to happen in this world and this opening that's going to happen, they're going to have no choice to awaken. And they're going to be asking for this stuff. That's why wayshowers, guides, people that are showing up and asking about this stuff. Larissa's commenting a lot about this in this last little while. They want to pave a way to get us back to have our sexual needs met, to get sex out of shame and guilt and start to use it for healing, start to negotiate with a lot of people to explore ourselves, to find that smorgasbord of life. Oh, what feels good? Do you like domination? Do you like ass play? Do you like being chained up? Do you like to be inverted? Do you like shibari? All these things. How are you going to know until you've had somebody do that? And if you have a community, what if you have a community where there's a lot of people that are experts in those areas, and it's like, hey, I want to try out bondage through shibari or whatever. Oh, well, James in the group is amazing at that. Go try it. And you're going to try it with somebody that's good at it. And then you're going to feel the best about it from the beginning. But where do you go to that? You can't. And what's wrong with that? Why is it bad that our sexual needs might want to be met, or that where does our mother or father or their judgment or our grandparents come in, or what our religion thinks about us for us having a base need met? By them restricting and keeping those base needs away from us is what's controlling us and hurting us. And then we feel small, we don't feel worthy. The whole process is fucked up. Online dating, all this kind of shit is crap. I want to find a group of people. And if there's people that want to do that, I'm willing to set something up. Let's have a Zoom once a week and have a group of people. We can split people out into rooms to start to negotiate and talk about this stuff and build the agreement so that we get comfortable with it. And then when it shows up in our physical space where somebody's nearby and we can start to do this stuff, we can start to use these tools. And then our base needs can be met. And we ask about them from the beginning. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with asking. Are you going to go to the grocery store and just assume everything about the grocery store and how they treat their meat and how they wash their hands and all this kind of stuff? Or are you going to go in there and say, hey, how's the sanitation in your meat department and all this kind of stuff? By asking those things, you can now start to feel safe, because now you know what's really going underneath. You have a relationship contract. You can negotiate with that person. Do you have anybody else in your life? Do you feel more comfortable being this monogamous, or can they date other people during it? Do STDs have scary for you? Do all these things? You can bring it up in the front and say, hey, the container that makes me feel safe so I can really experience you says just you and me. And how do I bring that up if I don't feel, or if you're flirting with somebody else or whatever, or what do I do with jealousy when it shows up? You put that in a contract and say, whenever you're jealous, you got to speak about it. Now we're starting to work on the edges of other things where we don't feel safe when other people are loving other people. What's wrong with loving everybody in the world? And what if there's sexuality in that? What's the story that goes on? What's the scary? What's the, oh, you're not honoring me? There's a big programming shit show that goes on in our head. It's a nightmare. So now let's pull those all into conscious awareness, have a statement, and then we can start negotiating with a person, feeling safe in that period. And what's really 3 months? In the long run, 3 months is enough to get past the really shitty sex that started at the beginning where you're not really connected with people. And I really think it takes 3 to 4 times before we start to feel comfortable. We get out of our lack, we get out of all these things. Now we build a container. That 3 months, you're really going to start to know that person. You're really going to start to flow with them sexually and connect with them dynamically way more than you'd ever have with dating, because dating has an endpoint, engagement, moving in with each other, whatever, where this doesn't. It just says, okay, we're going to go through all this stuff and we're going to see if we want to continue after 3 months. What a beautiful place to start. And all it takes is a little communication, a little bit of training, getting people comfortable with it. And then, wow, my needs are met. Now I'm making choices from not feeling in lack. I'm like, holy shit, this woman is amazing sexually, or this man is amazing sexually, and this is really feeling good. That's a person you want to go to the next level with. How else could you have got to that next level? Have a relationship agreement like this and try it out, explore, and then move forward. So how else are you getting your sexual needs met? How else is that basal thing? And if you follow the hierarchy of need, I can see if I can post something in the comments, but until you get past those first 2 or 3, you're really not living. You're not in your dreams. You're not in your excitement. You're not really engaged. So that's holding us back. And until we can get that move past, and then we can be in our passion with a partner and make sure our sexual and body needs, and we're clearing out the cortisol and all these negative traumas are all flushing out of our system by having good quality orgasms and sex with a partner, lots of parasympathetic release and touch and all this, you're going to be a way different person. You're going to deal with stuff a lot better. You're going to be more normalized and you're going to be happy. So just my experience, I've been through all this stuff, and I wouldn't say I've got it perfect, but the relationship contracts that I've started to work in my world, and the way I start talking to people and sharing this stuff has made me feel so much safer, has made possible more and more exploration, has made possible me stepping forward, being more worthy, being more confident, etc. And we just got to let go of some of the old ways, and it's going to be magic. So last comment. Thank you, Kathy. James says, knowing God works within us, not outside, of us, is a shift I wish to see. I agree. And this is going to be magic. Once we can institute this with people, this affects ourselves, talking about what we want and what we need, and making it okay for us to be needy at first and whatever, is going to give you permission to go even deeper. And then that other person's going to feel vulnerable, your vulnerability, and they're going to go even deeper. And then this like ladder of unfolding just kind of rolls out. And now you're at the deepest depths of their soul and their heart, which you wouldn't have got any other way. Marriage and all these things isn't about being vulnerable and explaining our trauma or our past rapes or our family violence or how our parents were. No, we block that all. That's why marriage doesn't work. That's why 60% of people are getting divorced. And I bet you the ones that aren't being divorced have a lot of inner strife going on, and they're just holding on for dear life because what would the family think? And what about the kids? And I know so many women that hanged on for 20 years just to let the kids go. And at the end, the kids said, Mom, why didn't you leave sooner? We saw it. And I'm just saying, let's build new agreements. Let's start to choose us, and magic's going to happen. So thank you all for all your comments, and I wish you well, and add more comments on what you want to hear. I love to share this stuff, and we need a new world. We need better ways, and I think this is the magic that's going to get us there. So love you all. Have fun, and I hope this expanded your mind a little. Have a great day. We'll talk to you soon.